Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sallenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with Lois Ehrmann about working with children's and parents' parts. Hey everyone. On today's episode, I chat with Lois Ehrmann, a Level 3 IFS therapist and frequent staff member for Susan McConnell's Somatic IFS trainings. Lois is a grandmother extraordinaire. I want to drop the boy off at her house for a week. Or maybe I'll drop all my exhausted, overwhelmed parenting parts off. Lois has integrated IFS and attachment therapy with families struggling with trauma. She develops a narrative method to teach parents and children the concepts of IFS, which has empowered children to use the method of insight as well as direct access. She is now mostly doing training and consultation as she co-parents her 3-year-old granddaughter. I love this conversation with Lois. And I just want to give you a little bit of an update. We recorded this right after the Capitol shootings, which we talk about. And I checked with Lois this week, and she is fully vaccinated and she is back home with her family. Email Lois to get the copies of her 2 books, which we talk about over and over because she emailed them to me, and I cannot stop raving about these books that I think she needs to publish. But she is incredibly generously, I keep using the word incredible, she has generously offered them to our community for free. So her email, if you want to get the parenting and or kids workbook, which we talk about in the episode, her email is loisehrmann@gmail.com. LOISEHRMANN@gmail.com. Of course, that information is on the show notes. I would love to hear from you at IFS Tammy on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse, or on the One Inside Facebook page. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, etc. Enjoy.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. This is really cool.
Thank you. I'm really excited. And I have to say, there's a part of me that's like, wants to say it this way. So I'm going to say I'm speaking from a part.
Okay.
Because it's going to say you need to publish those books. You need to, we need to be able to find them on Amazon and have our clients and us. I'm sorry. They're just really good. I was like, this is my face scrolling through them. I was like, oh my gosh. And I immediately wanted like a book that I could hold and touch.
Yeah. I know.
How is that feeling saying that? Part of me is like, oh my gosh, you're being so obnoxious. But how is that feeling?
Oh, well, welcome to your obnoxious part. That's okay.
Thanks.
I've tried to have them published, but I just never had the time to actually go through that whole thing. And then they were written in the spirit of, let's say it this way. They were not written in the spirit of getting any profit from them. How's that? Right? I am planning to write a book and have been consulting with Pessy on writing a book on kind of like a how to do IFS as well as in general trauma treatment for attachment struggling children and their parents. Just sort of bringing in the IFS and the way that I do IFS, which you can see in those workbooks, how I work both with children and with their parents on really helping them to heal through one of the things that I'm trained to do, which is the IFS. Yeah.
So let's back way up. So okay. I think a part of me just had to say that, let's just get that on the table. And okay. we'll talk more about the books and how people can get them if they want them and all that good stuff. Sure. But I'm sorry to say, people that are listening, that you're going to want to print them. Mm-hmm. You're going to want little workbooks. As I'm using my hands to make the form of workbook. So, how I usually like to start the podcast is I like to ask people where they are in the world and what would they see if they looked out their nearest window.
Right, right. Yeah. And you had told me that was something that you like to ask. And I was like, wow, what window should I sit at?
Aw.
Yeah, well, because right now I am in our what was going to be our retirement home in New Jersey at in near a beach. It's not like right at a beach, but it's near a beach. And I'm sitting at my kitchenette or my dining room area window. And what I see in my backyard is that my backyard butts up against a small, it's not large, but a small piece of preserved wetland. Mm. The bay is just 2 blocks down the road. And my backyard has like a little pool in it for my granddaughters. There's also like a playhouse that I made for when they come to visit. But this little patch of wetland is like, I don't know, it's like a little piece of paradise because there's all kinds of ducks that go there, and we've had swans nest there. And there's been a couple of times where when one of my granddaughters was like only about 2, we had the little kiddie pool for her, and a duck came out of the back of our backyard and walked really, really close to her. And she's like, huggy, huggy. I'm like, we don't hug wild animals,
Isn't really fair because they're so cute and
yes.
I want to hug them.
And she was like going quack, quack. She was about 2.5. Aww. And I'm like, honey, that's really cool that there's a duck there. But grandma can't let you hug a wild animal. But it's just beautiful because there's all kinds of, animals back there, and a couple of trees in our backyard that, kind of rise up to, we have like a multi-tier deck in this house. And my sister actually calls this house the tree house because it is high off the ground. The property has been in my family for generations. And when Hurricane Sandy came, we had bought the little house that was on here, but Hurricane Sandy kind of toasted, that house. And so this was the rebuild, which we had built as our retirement home. So I'm here prematurely, though. I'm not fully retired, but COVID has made it that it's safer for me to be in this dwelling while my husband and my daughter who lives with us and my granddaughter are in our house in Pennsylvania.
Wow. So how far away are you from each other?
We're about 4.5 hours away.
Okay.
But this way, my daughter and my granddaughter can get their needs met. They're both in school. My daughter's in college and my granddaughter is in preschool. And I have to say it was my IFS, the way I live IFS that prompted me to like kind of put myself in a kind of an exile because I couldn't bear the burden that either of them would hold if they brought COVID into the house and I got infected. I have some risk factors that it would not be a good thing if I got COVID. And so everybody could get what they needed. We felt blessed that we could do this. And we have kind of figured out a new normal. We figured out how to strategically do quarantining and get tested so that we could be together for some of the holidays.
Tell me about the what you just said, like how I use IFS in my life. I was able to say like I wouldn't want that as a burden.
Well, I think IFS is permeating into all kinds of settings nowadays, right? The classroom, the lawyer's office, the mediator's office, and working with children and bringing IFS to children and really hearing the burdens that their young little souls take on. I just was so aware of what was happening with children and how they were being impacted and how the whole COVID thing was traumatizing them. And it just was clear to me that I did not want to risk a chance of my daughter and granddaughter ever being saddled with the burden of, oh, I carried COVID into our home and grandma got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if I didn't make it through, if I didn't survive, what would that mean? So my parts were like, okay, we have this other house. I'm going to go and work there.
Yeah.
And we Zoom every night.
Aww.
So we Zoom. We have a date every night at 6:00 while they're eating. We Zoom and I read books or draw pictures or
I love that. I love that. Do you have just the one granddaughter and the one daughter, or you have other kids? No, you have a son too. I know. I read in your book.
Yes, I have a son, and my son and his wife. I have my oldest granddaughter who's 5, and they live a few short blocks away from the Capitol in Washington, D.C.
Wow. Okay.
And they're all okay. They're all okay.
Yeah.
Although it was a couple of hairy hours there while that whole deal was going down.
Were they at home when that happened? Like, were they all 3 home? Okay.
Oh, yes. They battened down the hatches. And they had such a creative way of keeping my 5-year-old granddaughter blissfully ignorant. They're like, turned off her light, and we're encouraging her to believe that she can pretend that she's living in the ocean for the whole day, kind of thing. And I even Zoomed with her, and she's like, "Grandma, we're in the ocean." I'm like, "Oh, great! Are you a mermaid?" Type thing. So they work for the State Department. My son and daughter-in-law both. My son is still a Foreign Services officer. So was my daughter-in-law up until very recently when she, went over to kind of the civilian division of the State Department, so she could have more flexibility in raising her daughter. So they have, in their 3 other previous posts with the State Department, they were in places that were dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so it was quite ironic that my son and I were talking. I'm like, you were in Juarez, you were in Qatar, you were in Egypt.
Right.
And I'm more worried about you now when you're just, in the capital of our nation.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But we got through it, and they're okay. And, things are going to be okay. They're stationed in Washington for a couple of years.
Okay. I feel like you clearly have a love of kids and for kids. And I'm curious how that started and how you developed this passion for working with kids.
Yeah. Well, of course, all of that starts in your family of origin.
Right.
Like, we have to name that, it all starts there. I was the oldest of 5 in my family of origin. An Italian Catholic dad who married an Irish Protestant, woman, my mom. And back then that was a mixed marriage. So
yeah,
there was an interesting dynamic there. But I was the oldest, and my parents, struggled with their own, burdens. And I became very, very much like a little mother in that family. Mm. And I used to be called the little Army drill sergeant, because I would be like, get up, go to bed, eat your carrots, kind of thing. And I didn't realize until much later, as a result of some of my own, IFS and other trauma therapeutic experiences, that my siblings were like, you were like really our mom, type thing. And they started telling stories of like how, yes, I was a little Army drill sergeant, but there were times where I would read books to them, get treats for them, and I just loved them. I mean, there was just no other way to get around it. I just saw the beauty in all of them from a very young age, and knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in some helping profession. I was kind of I was brought up to be a therapist, kind of thing. And so it really started there. And then in my first jobs, I started working with children from alcoholic and dysfunctional families, because of the first, I would say, half of my career was really in working with substance abusing populations. And so I worked with adolescents and their families. I worked with children that came out of alcoholic, addicted, dysfunctional families, and that just carried on. And I really began to see how trauma was at the heart of so much pain. And so went back to get my doctorate to study, how to really heal trauma in children and their families.
Yeah.
That we also adopted a child. My son is a biological child. My daughter is our adopted child, and she came from a very hard place. She was an abused infant, and I could really see how she could not feel safe around me. And so that was the beginning of learning and researching on attachment wounding. And out of that came, so much of my development as an attachment therapist, as a traumatologist, through IFS and EMDR and some of the other trauma therapies that I do.
When did you discover IFS?
I was actually in an EMDR training. And so I discovered EMDR first. And one of my colleagues was there, somebody who I had worked with, like some years earlier. And then we lost contact, and then we re-engaged. We always liked each other. We served on like a training board prior. And she and I were talking, and I'm like, this EMDR training is bringing up trauma that I thought was already healed, And I think she was the one that said to me, I'm learning through this IFS therapy that I'm in that, EMDR was great, but it only helped me manage my managers. It didn't really heal the trauma.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, no. I don't want to say it on tape. Well, okay, no shit, I said, really. And so that really, affected me. And I said, okay, I need to check this out. And so I entered IFS therapy. And I was already in the doc program, really studying trauma and whatnot. And my experiences in that therapy really lit up a prompting for me about the need to open a trauma center, the need to really open a counseling center that really specialized in healing core traumas and traumas of all kind. And very relatively shortly into my own IFS therapy journey, it was really clear to me, like, I got to learn this, because this really has the potential to help people graduate out of therapy.
Yeah.
And the other stuff was good too. The EMDR was great. I also did neurofeedback and play therapy and, Sandtray and attachment focused family therapy. But the thing that was central in all of that really became the internal family systems work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you opened this trauma center for kids and for families.
Right. We did is we even based the climate and the way we operated on internal family systems. Like we would have staff meetings and we would all go inside first, and people would have a chance to speak for their parts, you know.
Wow.
We trained people in IFS. We formally trained 3 or 4 people in IFS, and everybody got formally trained in EMDR. And then when we would have like team meetings, we would be like, what's everybody's inner wisdom saying about this? And because we were focused so much on trauma, and I had done a lot of research, and my dissertation was on trauma. I knew that it was a responsibility of the leadership of Choices. That's the name of the trauma center. To modulate the effect of trauma on the staff.
Yes, because it can be there's sort of secondary trauma that happens for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we developed policies and procedures to accommodate, that need for mitigation, that need for modulation, of trauma, secondary vicarious trauma that happened in our staff. So if we had, for example, a client who completed suicide, we had a whole procedure, like everything shuts down. We form a team, a processing team. That processing team, works with, the clinician, working through all of that clinician's parts about it, their self, their compassion, all of that. We give that clinician time off if needed. We just had this really, really lovely way of helping our clinicians in working through the trauma. We also did, twice a year, we did workshops on compassion fatigue and staff self-care.
So important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also, I thought it was really, really important for the staff to have, ongoing consultation and supervision. So we built all that really into the program.
So if someone is listening and they're someone who works with kids who have been through trauma, what, I don't want to say what kind of advice would you give, but I guess I'm asking that because I'm guessing there's a couple different types of people that are listening, right? Sort of the someone's listening who works with kids, and then you have parents that are listening who have kids. And so I'm wondering, I guess I'm wondering sort of advice from all of your years of wisdom for these two groups of listeners.
Oh, that's a big thing.
I know.
Well, one of the things I would definitely say to both, in regard to children and their parents, is to really understand that there's nothing wrong with your child or with you as a parent. That what is going on is because of what happened outside of the child. That pushed that child's parts into some extreme behaviors in order to survive and protect. And that the trauma counseling, going for trauma counseling specifically is really important, because we don't need children who have been traumatized to be re-victimized by diagnoses.
Yeah, and my guess is that happens all the time.
All the time. We don't need them to be re-victimized by medications if they're not needed.
Yeah.
We don't need them to be labeled as, bad or acting borderline or acting antisocial or acting oppositional. Right. If the core of what has happened is really that those behaviors are their protective behaviors for the hurt that was imposed upon them from the outside.
Yeah.
And it's not like that I'm against medication, because I'm not against medication. Life is short, childhood is short. If medication helps a child to continue to keep growing and healing in therapy, then I think it's warranted. But it's so important to keep that truth about what's really going on in the forefront.
Why is that important? That's sort of the truth of this external thing that happened versus something is internally wrong with you.
That's so important, Tammy, because, you know, I've treated, and so have my clinicians, so many children and adults, children in adult bodies, right?
Right.
Who have been burdened and impaired because of the shame that their system has taken on, because people did not keep in the forefront that there's nothing wrong with you. It's what happened to you. That is what's wrong, right? And so people who have been traumatized for many, many years move from something bad happened to me very quickly into, well, it must have happened because I'm bad or evil or not good enough in some way. So we have to be really hyper vigilant, I think, about that. Yeah.
And I think IFS gives us a framework of doing that, of like knowing how to do that.
Well, and that's why I wrote the workbooks. And all of the stories in the workbooks are all real stories that the names have been changed to protect the innocent. Some of the circumstances have been changed to protect the innocent, but they're based on all real clients. And what I began finding was that if I could use the workbooks, and sometimes I read the stories to children or their parents read the stories to them, it can be used in so many different ways. I was able to help them do more insight in their own systems. Not that we didn't do a lot of direct access too, but we were really able to help them get to where they could have access to self and could, really begin to heal their own self identities or heal the burdens that they were carrying. And it was just beautiful to watch. So that was the whole reason why I wrote the books.
Well, one of the things I loved about the books is, and I feel like the books could be used for anybody like that, right? Like it's not just for children. Like even if it's written for children, like you could give that book to anybody, and they could I think they would enjoy it. Their inner little parts would enjoy it, and because it just really walks people through the model just so simply and beautifully. And I love the examples. I love the examples, and I love the art, because I think it gives us an example of like, oh, I could do that. Oh, okay, I know what you mean, because I hear the story, and then you do a great job teaching it, right? Because you tell it the story, you show the art, and then you give these fun examples, or even like the fun exercises, like the word search on the emotions. I was like, that was brilliant. And so many of the creative exercises, I was like, this is great. So you're teaching it several different ways. And then modeling it. It's like, oh, okay, so I can understand not just like, hello, you have parts and but I'm reading a story about a kid, and here's the story, and then you sort of tease out what's happening in the story.
So it was really really a journey, and I have to tell you that first story in the children's book is a real story, and I got permission from the parents. I don't use this clip anymore, but I did for a while in my trainings, and I would say the story was written for this kid, right? And they gave me permission to do that, and so you see me reading the story to the boy.
Aww.
And he's like, I do that sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I take him through, all those exercises and whatnot. And it's really kind of cute.
So do you have a way of, if someone's listening and they want to start talking to kids about parts, like, do you have a way that you like teaching people to do that? Or that you just do it, that you just start talking to kids about parts?
Well, the very first thing I do is I talk to the parents about the workbooks. And I ask them to read at least the children's workbook to make sure that there's not anything in there that is contrary to their own beliefs or their lifestyle. Because I do talk about self, and I give examples of what self could be. And I try to do it in a super respectful way, but I don't want like parents to like feel, well, this is against our belief system, so we're not going to use it. Mm-hmm. So I do have parents, read the books, I also give them the parent manual, and also make it really okay for parents to say, well, I like these chapters, but not this chapter, kind of thing, right? I also use this wonderful book by Dori Cameron called Why Did I Do That? Are you familiar with that book?
I am, yes.
I use that book a lot for people of all ages, because it, in such a gentle way that has never been misunderstood by anybody who I read it to. It really explains IFS, the basic concepts, so well.
Yeah.
There are times that I do just start using it organically when the client I'm working with is really open to it. And I find that children are much more open to it than adults. But some of that could be that my center is located in the heart of Penn State University in State College. So a lot of our clients are very intellectual.
Okay.
And they want to understand, what's the data on this? What's the empirical validation and all that? And luckily I have that for those parents. But with children, it's often that, we'll start talking about parts in the sand tray room or even in my office where I'll label, like, okay, so your anger got bigger than you when you threw the salad bowl at mommy, Yeah, so that's a part of you, that part that got bigger than you. And there's nothing wrong with it. We just have to help it stay smaller than you so you can protect it rather than it continuing to protect you. Can you pick an object in my office that can be like that part, that angry part that got bigger, or can you draw it? I do a lot of drawing with kids too. Can you draw that part? And then once that child, so the child is usually very engaged because we're looking at it from, a fun kind of perspective. And I will start role modeling right then and there by saying, I want to welcome that angry part of, I'm just going to use this name, of Joey. It got really angry and got a lot bigger than mommy and so I'll start even saying you angry part took the salad bowl and threw it at mommy. Yeah, we get that. You got so big. And we know that you're there for a reason, so we don't want you to go away. We just want you to be safe. So how can we help you be safe? Kind of thing. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how it often happens.
That's beautiful. Well, it takes away the shame, right? We know that sort of takes away the shame. Yeah. And then you and Joey begin to have a relationship with this right. Big angry part that got bigger than him.
Right. And the mom and dad are usually there too, because I work mostly in a family context.
Gotcha.
So they're witnessing and they're like, and usually I look up at mom and dad and they're like, yeah, that's what happened. We knew we shouldn't like spank them or anything for that, kind of I'm like,
right. Yeah. But we don't know what to do, right? Because then our parts, I'm thinking as a parent, right? Then my part gets triggered. If my kid throws a salad bowl at me, then my part gets triggered. And, then a part that's bigger than me takes over. That's like, he's so disrespectful.
Right. And that's where Tom Holmes' Z process comes in really handy. That's another book that I really like is Parts Work by Tom Holmes. And I just really kind of adapted his Z process into the Z process between a child and a parent.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that for the listener so they know what that means?
Sure. So it's often the case, well, it's always the case, even myself as a grandmother get into a Z process with my grandchildren sometimes, right? So if we are using that same example of Joey, who got really, really angry through the salad bowl at mommy, the first part of that, I would definitely, kind of name the part, help the child name the part that got angry bigger, right? And then I would move into, and I might even use a whiteboard to do this. Okay, so here's Joey's little self, and here's that angry part that exploded. And here's mommy over here. And mommy, what feeling did you have when Joey threw the salad bowl? Mommy might say, oh, I was really, really upset with him because it broke all over. Okay, so upset, sad, glad, scared, or mad, mom? Right. Oh, I usually have a mom. This is early in therapy. I usually have a mom said, at least 3 of the above. Oh, okay. So what was the one that was biggest? Oh, mad. Initially mad. Okay, so I'll draw mad. So here's mad, right? And so what did you say back? What did the mad part say back to Joey? Oh my gosh, Joey, why did you do that? Go into timeout right away.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Joey, when mommy's mad part yelled at you and sent you to timeout, what did you feel? More mad. Oh, so your mad got bigger. And then sad. Oh, and there was sad. So let's label that. So mommy, when you saw him getting more mad and sad, what came up for you? Did you get more angry? Did your mad part get bigger than you? And typically the mom will say, well, no, I saw all the shards of glass, on the kitchen floor. And I actually got worried. I got scared because I didn't want anybody to get, cut. Yeah. So you got scared. Joey, did you see mommy's face get scared? Because we'll do a lot of attachment work too during all of this. Yeah. Mommy, can you let your scared part tell Joey what you got scared about? And I'll usually help the mom do that if she needs it. And then what else? What else was going on? And the mom will say, well, I also got sad because I knew that he had a bad day. I knew he had been telling me that kids were picking on him at school. And I maybe I just wasn't listening hard enough before the explosion happened. I'm like, oh, that's maybe so. Does that make your mommy a bad mommy? Sometimes kids will say yes. And I'll use that as a way to teach, no, that doesn't make your mom a bad mommy. That just makes her a worried mommy, or sometimes a scared mommy, but it doesn't make her a bad mommy. Nobody's bad ever, kind of thing. So that's how we begin doing it. And I'm often drawing this. And then, eventually we let the child leave the session, and the mom and dad usually are like, whoa, that was very illuminating, kind of thing.
Yeah. And what you're doing, which the listeners can't see you, but what you're doing is you're literally moving your hand back and forth. You're literally like going from one side to the next, and sort of in this Z motion, sort of going corner to corner to corner to corner. Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
And in the workbook that the parents have are examples of that. And some of the worksheets for them are picking interactions where there's an explosion like that and kind of getting the Z process outlined.
Love it. And just mapping it, mapping the kids' parts, mapping the parents' parts, mapping how they react to each other.
Right.
Love it.
So I really thank Tom Holmes for his book, because that really became, just a candle in my own system of, this is what's going on with the parents and the kids too. Yeah, I definitely want to put a plug in for Somatic IFS, because I am trained in all 3 levels, but I did a little detour and went to Susan McConnell's Somatic IFS retreat a couple of times. Between my level 1 and my level 2, I like a detoured because I just felt, listen, Susan was my level 1 trainer, but I just felt like, oh, I need to know this both personally and professionally. So I want to put a plug in for like body and sensations and implicit memories, especially when you're working with children. That somatic IFS just really fits the model with working with children so much. We do a lot of body mapping. Where are you feeling that feeling, that you have in your stomach? Can you draw that in your stomach? And they just love it. Kids just really respond to it really well.
I love that in the book you had outlines, and I remember I used to in my office, I had a clipboard with an outline of a body and would do that sometimes.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot that I used to do that, but so I love that you had a couple different examples of
Right.
that in your book.
Right.
Why do you think that's important for kids, especially?
I don't know for sure, but my sense is that more than words or quicker than words for them come the sensations. Like if we're talking about that example with little Joey, before he could articulate what was bothering him, he just felt the energy in his hands and he had to release it in some way. And so that was, that's often a way that the kids do it. So I have ways that kids can physically get that energy. Like I have a kicking pillow. I let them rip up paper. What do your hands need to do? They need to rip up paper, whatever. They need to run around the center. I mean, we have like a kind of an inner hallway and an outer hallway. And I'm like, you need to take a couple of laps. I mean, let's go take some laps, So just kind of that somatic IFS piece has really also been a part, of the work that I do with kids and with all clients now. I'm one of Susan's helpers. Susan McConnell is doing some somatic IFS, trainings now, and she's asked me to be one of her helpers, and it's really a joy and an honor. And I can't speak enough for, how that influence has also really been important in my work with families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense because kids just developmentally, right? They can't say, I am feeling really mad because
Right.
you didn't let me play my video game longer.
Right. Yeah.
So right, they're going to feel it in their bodies first. So having them connect with their body and so when you say somatic IFS, like is there something like are you thinking of like what does that mean? Like, sort of how is that different? Like Susan, I've only met her though, she did the podcast and I was blown away by her. So when you say that, how is that looking different or sort of what do you do differently or add to?
Yeah. So one of the things that's, super important is that somatic awareness. And especially with children, I can see you're feeling something, but you don't have the words. Where is it in your body? Kind of teaching them like how, like my chest is going, or my granddaughter will say, my heart's going, Grandma, my heart's going, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I get it. So really kind of, helping them to connect what's happening in their world through their body with what their body is feeling.
I love that.
I had an experience recently with my little one, my 3-year-old Maya. She got in trouble at preschool because she hit a little boy who took her toy. And my daughter's like, can you talk to her? Because my daughter, who is also in college right now, is like, I tried on the way home and we weren't getting anywhere, and I'm like, Maya, honey, did, so-and-so took your toy away that you were playing with? And she said, yes. I said, and then your hands felt like you had to hit them because of that? And she said, yes. And I said, and were your hands and your heart feeling mad? And she said, no, Grandma, I was feeling sad. And she looked sad. And my daughter went, whoa, like that. She turned around. She was eating. She was like, whoa, like that. I said, oh, so it is sad. You felt sad that this boy took your toy away. And she said something like, he's supposed to be my friend. I'm not remembering this so clearly now because it was a couple of months ago, but it was like, he's supposed to be my friend. I said, oh, so your heart was hurt. Yeah. So since then, she hasn't done that anymore. You have to knock on wood that she
Right.
anymore, right? But it was like so telling. And I think, we can perceive how kids are feeling, how we think kids are feeling. But really focusing on the body helps them get clarity and helps us get clarity with that. And more, once we can get something more in tune, like with what they're going on, things tend to resolve because their parts are feeling witnessed accurately being witnessed,
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And I think it probably would help with some of the frustration of trying to have a conversation like that doesn't go anywhere and we get more and more frustrated about like, why did you do that or whatever like that. I love that. And I love what you said about like, what were your hands feeling and what was your
Yeah.
heart feeling?
Yeah. 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 So her hands hit, but her heart was hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not angry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that it does increase a skill set in a child. It increases a skill set, a body awareness skill set that, before when I was working with children and I maybe wasn't doing somatic IFS as much, I needed to work harder than them a lot. And as a result of really incorporating some more of the somatic pieces, they're working more in tune with me now. Kind of is how I've envisioned it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that too, the idea that you're developing a skill set. Because think about kids as they get older and older and older, like sort of
Right.
kids in middle school. And
Right.
like, what does my body want? My peers are
Sure.
doing this or whatever. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, can you imagine if you had that? I mean, if I had that skill.
Oh, my life would have been a lot different had I had that skill earlier on, for sure.
Oh, I know. Okay, so can you tell everyone how to get the books? I don't want you to get flooded with emails, but
yeah, that's okay.
okay.
They can get the books by going to my email, which is loisehrmann@gmail.com. Very simple, just my name at gmail.com, and requesting the books. And then I send it to them in an attachment. Sometimes like people, because I do give it away for free, people are like, can I give a donation anywhere? And what I usually say is, if you want to, give a donation or something like that, can you give it to the IFS Institute? Because my nerdy parts, my geeky nerdy parts, worked on, I was like one of the lead developers. There were other people too on the IFS adherence scale. So that was really helpful with some nerdy parts that I had a couple of years ago, and that instrument was really important to develop in order to do outcome-based study and get the validation going for IFS as an empirically validated model. So that's basically what I say. Make a donation to the IFS Foundation for their work. They're doing some incredible work.
And so, right. So for the IFS, for people that don't know, so the IFS Institute, and then there's the foundation, and the foundation is the one so the Institute does trainings.
Right.
And then the foundation is the one that's doing the research.
Right.
And is that right?
Right.
And does like research articles and
Yep.
with that, how we got to be evidence-based is all through the foundation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And
correct.
can you get to the foundation through the IFS Institute website, or is it a different website?
I think you can. I think there's a link.
Okay. Okay. I'll put it on the show notes. Like
Yeah.
I'll put your
Okay.
email there, and then I'll put the link to the foundation on the show notes.
Yeah.
I mean, can people print these out? I
Oh
just
yeah,
felt
yeah, yeah.
wrong to print.
Oh no. No, no, no. I give people permission to print them out. And what people usually do is they'll print out a chapter at a time
Okay.
for like a client. So they don't have to invest because it is, yeah, I mean, they're books. So,
Yeah, I think the one is like 100. So this one is like 100 pages,
right,
and the
right,
other one's a little bit more than that.
right.
Like I'm gonna
Yeah,
pull it up. I have it up.
yeah,
I love the parenting one because the parenting one is the other one, but has a
right,
lot of other stuff. So the parenting one is almost 200 pages, and then
right,
the kids one is about 100 pages.
right.
But I loved that the parenting one had like 20 pages before you even get to the kids material for the
Mm-hmm.
parents to do, like the
Right,
geneagram and like all kinds
right,
of stuff. And then it had the kids part in
right,
that. I thought that was pretty smart.
right. And then it also has what are the parts that that parent in the story might be having
Mm,
in this situation.
that's great. That's
And
great.
a lot of the parents that have used the manual, the parent manual, have been like, that's scary and awesome at the same time, Lois. Yeah. I have to look at, you mean I have to look at my own parts in every interaction I have with my kid. I'm like, well, yeah, kinda, you have to.
Right, right. Because Joey throwing the salad bowl doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right?
Right.
There's a system
Exactly.
happening. And so,
That's right.
yeah,
There's an interaction.
I know. And there's a part of me that's like, no, it's just Joey being naughty, naughty kid.
When I had a parent say that to me, I'm like, welcome to that part of you.
Right.
I've had that part too, so I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so my last question is if you weren't doing what you're doing, and I know you've done
Mhm.
lots of stuff, what could
Right.
you do instead? And you couldn't do what you're doing. What would you do
Okay.
instead?
I would do more art, do more writing, and be a full time grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I thought about that. I'm like, what would I do? You know, could I see myself ever not doing some kind of, you know, healing process, whether it be consultation or training, you know, type thing. I could see myself writing, traveling, doing art, and being around my grandchildren. So, yeah,
It sounds great. Well,
yeah.
thank you for this. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for doing this, Tammy. It's really a joy to be talking to you about this stuff.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.